And welcome back, everybody, to the HCT Winter Championship. I'm TJ, joined by the Admiral. That's Admirable. And we have the pleasure of bringing you guys the first match of the day, and it is going to be the winner's match for Group A. One of these players moving on to the quarterfinals, but the loser of this match, still in it, gets to fight in the decider matchup for the group. I'm looking forward to it. Admirable, it's going to be a great day. How you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. And if you're one of the players right now, I think you got to be feeling great about this. Even if the match doesn't go your way, you still get another chance. And that's the luxury you buy yourself when you win that initial match that took place in there. I was going to talk a lot about Viper, but to just kind of hit on it quickly, for those of you who've been following, you know, of course, he's qualified for the World Championships. He's had a fantastic year on the tour stop scene this year. And he's been doing it with decks that are really in his own style. That's really, I think, a lot of what Viper is about, is he's not afraid to trust in his own gut when it comes to building deck lists. Even looking at this playoffs where he brought a deck that ended up getting dubbed Peanut Shaman because they said it was the nuts. It was a very strange looking deck that still featured Shutterwalk when you couldn't infinite combo with it and performed very well. And here, you know, it's not really much of an exception to that. Malygos Rogue and Murloc Paladin, two decks that have been nigh extinct in the metagame. For Yuying, though, I do want to talk a little bit more about him because he's been, you know, quite unknown to me over the last year or so. He actually took second place at the 2019 Gold Series Grand Finals, which is how he qualified for this event. And in 2018, he actually won the Gold Series in Sunzo and it was the Sunzo champion as a result of that. And to me, that is such a tough tournament to win because the size of the Gold Series tournaments are absolutely massive, and all the best players in China play in those things.
Yeah, it's a really impressive resume from a Chinese player that we haven't seen much of. But talking a little bit about the overall lineups, yesterday, I wasn't too worried for Viper, but this lineup from Yuying is different from what we're used to seeing so far in the championship. It doesn't have an identity, really. It's not an aggro lineup, but it has a few fast decks like Oddro. It's not an anti-control lineup, but it has some anti-control classes like Malygos Druid. It's just a kind of a little bit all over the place, and Viper, his Odd Mage is banned, and he has to play Murloc Paladin and Malygos Rogue into two decks, which I don't think it's that well positioned against, which is the Control Priest, which can put together a lot of damage, and of course that Hunter, which has just overall been a solid deck.
Yeah, I definitely would think that just from a pure lineup perspective that Viper is at a disadvantage. But all of his decks feature the ability to have these draws that just win the game.
This is the start of one of them.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at the start of something that could be really big trouble for Yuying. You know, Viper here has brought Murloc Paladin, and it's about as straightforward, recklessly aggressive as you can imagine. 2 copies of Divine Favor. It caps out at 2 Call to Arms Leroy and Sunkeeper Tarim.
Yep. I played around with this deck a little bit leading up to the event, and I actually really liked it, but it's a lot more feast or famine than the Odd Paladin, for instance. It has the potential for blazing fast starts, and it can go a lot taller with, you know, say, Blessing of Kings and just Murloc War Leaders and Gentle Megasaurs to buff up small boards to a large size, but it doesn't have the longevity that Odd Paladin could have, and it doesn't have the board present once it falls behind, because your hero power only gives you 1 Silver Hand Recruit. So,
well, I don't think Viper has much interest in hero powering with this deck. You know, starting out very early on, Murloc Tidecaller, this is one of the scariest minions in the game you face against because you know what the possibilities on follow-up are. Yuying goes with Coin, Crackling Razor Maw to try to contest, which I think is very wise. And it just so happens that Viper has got the goods to really punish this. So, you know, even looking at this tournament, the Rockpool Hunter and the Righteous Protector, Yuying is already in a tough spot to be able to answer what Viper's going to be onto. Now, he does have Unleash the Hound, so he gets to end up making trades, but almost any way you slice this, Viper's going to be left with something on board for a Gentle Megasaur turn on the follow-up. This has been a fantastic start for Viper.
Yeah, this deck is very lean. It just runs 2 ofs of everything except the legendaries with Leroy and Sunkeeper. As you mentioned, even double Divine Favor, which against Hunter traditionally not a great tool to draw too many cards, but with Master's Call, a lot of times Hunter is holding on to a hand size of like 4, 5, 6, so you can usually get some value to that. So it does, that's where the inconsistency in the longevity comes out, because you don't want a hero power. You're oftentimes playing out as much as your hand as possible, hoping you draw Divine Favor, or ending the game before that even matters.
Yeah, I mean, with the aggro decks, there's always like sometimes little tricky things that you have to do with like sequencing and like making trades at times. And Yu Ying here, I think, is going to end up taking a bit of a wiser choice in just using the Animal Companion here instead of the Unleash the Hounds. With Timberwolf in hand, Yu Ying feels very confident that he can fight against a Gentle Megasaur in this spot. Oftentimes, you're going to find Viper taking options that are like Death Rattle, make some tokens, or like Divine Shields or what have you, and you're just going to need a way to fend this off. And so here, Viper ends up taking health because he needs to battle this Misha on board. So Yu Ying's effectively just buying himself more time and waiting until he can get that right Unleash the Hounds Timberwolf combo and try to wipe out the board and leave Viper stranded with a picked apart situation.
Yeah. And Viper's going to think about this a while. I like the trade with the Righteous Protector because of the threat of Unleash the Hounds. There is only one copy in Yu Ying's deck, however, but it's a card that's so valuable against any type of aggressive Paladin. So you can assume that that's what Yu Ying's looking for in the early game, along with the Spring Paws and the Crackling Razor Maws.
Yeah.
And
I think there is a lot of merit here for Viper actually using the Murloc to value trade in this situation. Okay. You are forcing Yu Ying to have almost exactly Unleash the Hounds to fight this back, and there's only a single copy of that in Yu Ying's deck. But at the same time, it's important to keep your Murlocs healthy so that they can stick around and you can, use Blessing of Might, draw Blessing of Kings, and just overall have them chip out more damage. And so that was the debate there for Viper. I think there's merit for the 2/6, but I think I'd like using the 1/1 more.
Glad we arrived at the same conclusion there. That's admirable.
Why are you glad about it?
Just we're on the same page today.
I kind of like when we're on different pages.
All right. I hated that trade.
Me too.
No.
I'm glad we're on the same page.
I'm glad we're on the same page today, Admirable.
And Yu Ying going to continue to bide time with the second Animal Companion.
He's going to take a lot of damage in the interim, though, which is what I'm worried about.
I'm worried about it, too. But, imagine if Yu Ying had gone for Unleash the Hounds Timberwolf here. He cedes the tempo right back over to Viper, and that's the disaster situation you're in when you're using your comeback mechanism to simply get to an even position on board. You want to swing the tempo of the game. And to me, that is one of the marks of a player who truly understands the matchup, who understands that it's necessary to take these styles of risks if you're going to succeed in the matchup.
And there's multiple arguments that can be made either way, right? And especially when you're in this high of a stakes event with such great players, is that if you can make plays that your opponent doesn't expect, a lot of times when you're hand reading, you're saying, what's the best play my opponent can make this turn? And then if he does not make that play, you can assume that he does not have that card or that play available. But when you get to a certain level of play, there's an additional level of mind games that goes into it, where your opponent can do the same thing and be like, what's the best play I can make this turn? I'm going to not make that play so that my opponent plays further into it. And that can also be a reason why Yu Ying holds on to this play to try and hope that Viper goes much wider on board.
Yeah, well, this wasn't much wider.
No, this is...
It's like leveling wars are a very real thing. You have to get pretty, deep down the rabbit hole for that to actually exist. But, here, I think it's really about Yu Ying just understanding that he needs to have the board actually swing into his favor if he's going to win this one. So, Unleash the Hounds, the Timberwolf, the Dire Mole sits on board, and that's 10 damage represented across the board. So it gets to pick off this Murloc and then start doing away with the rest of them. Looks to me like... I'd be surprised by a Tidecaller kill here, actually. I would love to see Yu Ying actually get rid of the Hydrologist, so that way it cannot value trade over the Timberwolf.
Yeah, and wise choice there. Divine Favor picked up right as Yu Ying empties his hand.
That's the other thing, too, is Yu Ying has been aggressively dumping cards so that the Divine Favor is mitigated by a tremendous amount. But boy, what cards does Viper get from it? Sunkeeper Tarim picked up, and that's maybe one of the cards that can, keep him on that front foot this game.
Yeah, this is a big play here.
This all, mind you, was with Yu Ying going second and with Viper having as good as a start as he had as well.
Yeah.
But Yu Ying is at 12, so there's not too much further to go. And if there's one thing I know about Viper, it's that he's going to take his time. Even at its heart of hearts, with this deck being effectively a burn deck, you do want to mitigate your opponent's grand options against you. And so Spring Paw, I think, is the big nod there when he trades off the Timberwolf.
Yeah, and is going to pick up the flanking strike to be able to take full control of the board. These are those swing turns you were talking about. Viper has a weak turn. Yu Ying capitalizes on it.
Oh,
Call
boy.
to arms!
Oh, boy, that's a huge draw for Viper right now. Righteous Protector to block. He's got a Hydrologist to add, but, in this spot, I think I'd like to see Hero Power. So that next turn, Viper can guarantee himself Hydrologist, curate the secret to his needs, and then play Sunkeeper Tarim.
Reporting for duty.
Yu Ying's in Trub. the official term for it. And that's not going to help.
No, but Master's Call, great pickup. Likely to pick up a Spring Paw here.
The Righteous Protector is the issue.
Oh, didn't pick up a Spring Paw.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Ewing's done. He can live this turn, but it's not for very long.
No.
You get to kill command a minion. You get to trade over with this Divine Shield. And then Sunkeeper Tarim gets to make some pretty devastating work of what's left of your life total.
Yeah.
And
Blessing of Might.
I've never seen Viper take a turn that fast, so I figured he must have drawn some damage.
Yeah, and this is a big win for Viper. I was worried about Murloc Paladin against Control Priest because of the Dustbreaker and Wild Pyromancer combination. Very anti-aggro, so taking a win with it early and getting that out of the way puts Viper in a fantastic position throughout the rest of this series.
Yep, he's got mid-range Hunter left behind this, and it is a different looking build than what we've seen from the rest of the field, and I'm kind of excited to see what's in there. I'll get to that in a second, but the big one for me now is that Viper has his Malagos rogue, and the Priest is still there to battle with. You know, you mentioned the Priest being a point where that could have been a really big point of struggle for Murloc Paladin, and I totally agree with you. Duskbreaker out of Yu Ying's Dragon Priest can just dominate that deck. And so now that he has Malagos Rogue to perhaps line up against that bit of a slower build, I think is a massive advantage for him. Yeah,
even Druid, it can get there. This is a Malagos Druid, so not quite as much armor gain as its Togwaggle counterpart. At least the strategies are different. You can't often afford to try and gain that much armor, even if it could be your primary win condition because you give too much time. But definitely a great start for Viper, getting maybe his toughest deck for the matchup out of the way in game number 1. But still a lot of series left to play here in match number 1 of day number 2 at the Winter Championship. We're going to go to a quick break. Don't go anywhere. More Hearthstone. Viper currently leads this first series of the day against Yu Ying 1-0 after taking that win with his Murloc Paladin. And with that win, I think that Viper has solidified a massive lead that 1-0 doesn't justify.
Yeah, the Paladin was I think the weakest deck against Yu Ying's lineup, and managing to get the game 1 win under your belt with it is pretty tough if you're sitting in Yu Ying's seat. But we just saw that piece with him, and he talked a lot about mindset in the interview, and keeping himself calm and staying focused, and really just taking it game by game. And that honestly was a big trend with a lot of the players at this championship when we talked to him. Even some of the returning players, where they talked about, so much about calming themselves and focusing on mindset was a big deal, because that first time they played on stage, they didn't realize how nerve-wracking it really was.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the success we're seeing, is that with the tour stop, all the tour stops they visited this year, and the fact that they got championship experience very early on, I think it really helped them coming into this final season before we head into the World Championships, just having that experience and understanding what it's like to be there.
Yeah, then we're going to move into game number 2 here, Yu Ying on the Control Priest. Different from what we've been seeing thus far in the tournament, with Cloning Gallery Priest being the overwhelming favorite as a deck choice for players. And it does feel like it's a little bit better position against Hunter, mostly because of the anti-aggro tools and its ability to get through the early game. Yu Ying has also opted to go for the full anti-aggro package with double Wild Pyromancer, plus those early spells, and Dustbreaker. But he also has Fire 2 Witch Doctor, so has cut some of that later game punch in order to get through the early game more consistently.
Yeah, we look at the top end, it's 2 Cabal Shadow Priest, Holy Fire, Crowd Roaster, the 2 Psychic Screams, of course, 1 Primordial Drake.
Yeah.
And then the Shadow Reaper Alexstrasza package that's in there. But I like the way that Yu Ying has built this, where it's very lean and concise and to the point. You know exactly what your deck wants to do, and you're trying to do that as consistently as possible. Yu Ying, I think, is one of the players in this tournament that clearly gave a nod to the fact that he thought aggro was going to be a force.
Yep.
And I think that while he didn't go the full way of doing that, it really shows throughout his lineup that he has paid close attention to it. The double Ferocious Howl in the Malagos Druid for the extra armor, the Blood Knight and double Tar Creeper that's in the Odd Rogue that he's bought, the fact that he's just got the extra minions in the Priest deck to keep fighting. I think this is a wonderfully built lineup that he has, and right now, he just seems to be getting the shorter end of the deal. Viper starts out with a 1-drop, has the Hatchet to add with it, has Deathstalker Rexar in hand if he needs that, and you know, already threatening with the Scavenging Hyena in terms of his range for Viper. You know, Yu Ying's got his work cut out for him this game.
Yeah, not the greatest opening hand. None of that early game that we talked about. All the burst damage effectively in the hand already with double Mind Blast Holy Fire, which actually limits his ability to close out the game in the late game without Shadow Visions to pick up extra copies of burst. And, you know, one of the reasons why Midrange Hunter has been so popular in tournament play and on ladder is because of its flexibility. It's just such a strong deck at every part of the game. It can get crazy early starts. It has a decent mid game, has card draw, Master's Call now, and also has the ability to play a resource battle in the late game with Deathstalker Rexar.
Yeah, and Viper's list is you know, quite different than what the rest of the players have brought to this tournament. His list looks more like a one that I first saw from Deathstar, who's a streamer and player who pretty much exclusively plays Hunter. Even if, like, when Hunter was like bad, you know, like if you're one of those people who likes to follow a particular team in sports, like when your team's the worst in the league, like, and you just keep rooting for him, that's Deathstar with Hunter. No matter what position it's been in, he has been playing that deck almost exclusively. And so Viper's list with double Life Drinker, double Tundra Rhina, no Savannah Highmane, double Dire Frenzy, and a deadly shot with 2 hatchets, no candle shot.
Yeah.
The list is made to do one thing in particular, and it's have staying power that continues to chip away at your opponent quite aggressively. And I actually like this particular list in a matchup like Priest, because one of the things that Hunter struggles with is actually sticking a reasonable board. In this matchup, Viper is free to throw away some of the resources to try to get chip damage, and then later down the road, use Dire Frenzies to put important minions back into the deck, whether that's Life Drinker to sustain through Shadow Reaper Anduin, whether it's Tundra Rhinos to make sure he can get burst combos. He's pretty much got everything necessary in the deck to tackle a matchup like this one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of the important parts about how this game is played out so far is, as I mentioned, Yu Ying does have limited burst because he can't pick up extra copies of Mind Blast with Shadow Visions, and that can be a problem in the late game. With Deathstalker Rexar, you can bank rush lifesteal minions, and you have time to do so to basically just negate the Priest's ability to burst you out of the game and slowly chip away at their life until you win. So even in a war of attrition, Viper's got his bases covered with Deathstalker Rexar already in hand. Now, he did not have that blazing fast start, but Yu Ying also didn't have any early game, so he's not behind by any means.
Yeah, the Priest not having early game, it definitely hurts. It's not the end of the world, though. You know, it's a deck that's built anticipating that sort of situation, which is one of the reasons that, you know, he's running the double Cabal Shadow Priest, the Holy Fire that's in there, or as Sato likes to call it, the bootlegged Ice Block, where sometimes you don't die when you play it. It's like, it feels like a GVG card with that name, where it's like, it works, unless it doesn't.
Oftentimes it works.
Yeah, and Dragon here, that's the reason why Yu Ying did not play the Scale Worm last turn. He was missing the Dragon in hand, picked up with Twilight Drake. And so for Viper, that's got to be a bit of like a raise your eyebrow sort of play. The Scavenging Hyena was in play last turn. The Scale Worm came from the far left. Why didn't he play it on 4 mana?
Because he didn't have a dragon.
Very possible.
That gives him a good amount of hand reading potential, because also if the dragon that he did pick up was Dustbreaker, that would have come down over the Scale Worm, almost certainly.
Unless he didn't have another dragon in hand.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's really the point I'm getting at here, is that Viper, you know, it's tough to track cards when you're on stage and there's a million different things to think about. And so for Viper, that's one of the reasons he likes to take his time, is like an order of operations thing, where you ask yourself question A, question B, question C, and then you come to a conclusion about the situation. If Viper's able to pay that close of attention and continue to track Yu Ying's hand, at some point he's going to be able to pinpoint almost what the exact cards in Yu Ying's hand are going to be, and oftentimes he's going to be able to absolutely take things like Primordial Drake and Dustbreaker out of the range for Yu Ying. Right now, Viper is giving still a nod to those types of situations. But I think in totality, Viper has a lot of room to work with where information's concerned.
And I had a couple lines of play in mind that last turn that Viper decided not to go with. One was just playing the Crackling Razor Maw to try and buff up the Dire Maul to make kind of that like wider board position, and using the weapon to clear off the Scale Worm. but opting to go with the second Scavenging Hyena because maybe he realizes that he may not have another opportunity to try and make a big one and get actual value off of it. Saving the Crackling Razormaw to potentially pick up Wind Fury the next turn if Ewing wasn't able to deal with it was a big bonus to that play. It is dealt with, and now Viper has to think, well, what's my plan now? Do I get Deathstalker Rexar online and play for the late game? Don't think that's great because you want to play for tempo. Or try and build up another board full of beasts, see if your opponent can deal with it. Yeah, I'm looking almost exactly at Life Drinker Crackling Razormaw here from Viper. I liked his play last turn because it gave a nod to a Duskbreaker being drawn. It gave a nod to Cabal Shadow Priest being a turn 6 play. Taking away Dire Maul and contesting a Scavenging Hyena is like a nightmare situation for him. So Viper, erring on the side of caution with that. I think that Cabal Shadow Priest card's extremely likely to be in Yu Ying's hand at this point. And so for Viper, it's just how do I continue to apply enough pressure without overplaying my hand at this stage? Because if there's a point where as soon as he has a weak turn, that's where Viper's really going to fall behind. And so I think there is consideration for Deathstalker Rexar because of what you said, the late game potential of banking lifesteal minions. And then also at the same time, Life Drinker in this particular matchup against Dragon Priest, it's one of the ones you really want to Dire Frenzy to keep staving off the damage that Shadow Reaper Anduin's going to apply. Yeah. And here, if Yu Ying, if his last turn was Holy Fire your 6/4, I don't really imagine Viper's too concerned about threats. That Twilight Drake has to be, not too surprising, but a bit of a surprise, I think, if you're in Viper's spot. Yep. I agree. He's going to try to go for Poisonous here. And another reason for Deathstalker Rexar last turn was if he played a bunch of his cards to build up a board, he was going right into Psychic Scream's turn after seeing that Yu Ying had a slow start. So trying to bank this and hoping that Yu Ying didn't have a proactive play in hand. Yeah, Viper's got a tough turn here. Something to think about as well is the Dire Frenzy that he just drew. If he goes for a Crackling Razormaw Spring Paw and it fails, maybe the Dire Frenzy is actually able to make it to a position where it doesn't. So you got +3 attack instead of Poisonous on the minion. So with Spring Paw, Crackling Razormaw, and with Dire Frenzy, a +3 attack would be able to actually kill the minion. But Viper clearly showing he has no interest in using Dire Frenzy this turn because he plays the 1/1 that does not add an extra Spring Paw to your hand. That's my opinion. And the reason why he didn't go for this right away, because I think he was trying to plan through his turn if he did not get Poisonous, or even what he does with the rest of his mana if he does get Poisonous is a big thing. Wow. Dire Frenzy on the Crackling Razormaw is very interesting. So just creating board tension and adding extra Razormaws, this actually makes a lot of sense because Crackling Razormaw is such a vital minion to combating the large minions that Yu Ying's going to be playing. I wonder if that's a bit too cautious on Viper's end, though, just be playing for these way late game scenarios like that. It also does give him a chance to draw tempo plays as well, though. The 2-mana 6/5 that Crackling Razormaw would be as a draw now. Yeah, that's almost 20% of the deck now. Big tempo swing for Yu Ying here, able to swap with the Twilight Acolyte and value trade over with the Scale Worm. And the scary part about this is he's got an Alexstrasza to back this up. Yeah. So if Viper doesn't have a way to pick apart this board, he's going to take a lot of damage. He's going to die. And hasn't banked any zombies. And you need a few turns, usually, to get to the point where you're getting rush lifesteal. And that's really what you talked about on turn 6, where you want to play for tempo. Viper chose to not do that. And although he would have, by happenstance gotten punished from a Duskbreaker draw on Yu Ying's side, I do think that playing the Deathstalker Rexar did leave him vulnerable to a situation like this, where Yu Ying's hand was likely to be quite clunky and full of slow cards like this. Now, we're seeing that Alexstrasza is being picked up, and instead his hand was, a bunch of Mind Blast and a Psychic Scream. But I think that not applying pressure to Yu Ying gives him a window to get aggressive. And when the Priest deck is able to attack you with a single minion, that's usually when you start finding yourself in trouble. Yeah. For Viper here, using health as a resource, I think, is super smart because he knows that Alexstrasza is on the horizon. Why not make use of this life that you anticipate could fall away? Agreed. And now it just seems like he's so far behind. You could tell the expression on Viper's face. He is
concerned.
Yeah, concerned. Doesn't seem happy with the way this game has played out. And
his face looks like you when I say something really dumb. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Oh, God, why?
I have to sit here for another hour and do this? Yeah, all right. I guess it's not that bad. Both players just have looked intensely focused throughout this set so far. 11. Yikes. Can Viper actually even answer this and stay alive?
He can, but it's ugly.
Is it double kill command?
It's double kill command.
Oh.
He could kill command, flanking strike, double spring paw trade into the Twilight Drake.
I wonder.
I'm thinking at this stage, Viper might need to roll and then just evaluate afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of some beasts that could, you know, pretty much hit Jin in this situation. And the big one I'm thinking about is what's his name? The 8/8 Bittertide Hydra with Lifesteal.
Which tracks to
So you're saying Bittertide Hydra plus Vicious Scalehide?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, that doesn't really play for tempo. That takes more risk, and I think playing for tempo is wiser right now. If Viper can get a turn from his opponent where, you know, Yu Ying Psychic screams, I think that Viper's overall pretty thrilled with that.
Yeah. But turns out there's a Crowd Roaster in hand, which matches up perfectly with this Scavenging Hyena.
It does line up pretty well for Viper, though, gets to swing it back with Flanking Strike and Spring Paw.
But at this point, I think he needs to start looking with those zombies.
Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. Oh, gosh.
8-4, 7-4 on board.
Well, all right. That technically answers things, but you take a lot of damage doing it.
Yeah. Which he can't afford to take a lot of damage because Yu Ying is just
roll a
one
beast
damage
time.
off lethal. All bad. All bad.
Taunt?
Taunt, but
does the taunt take 2 hits? Nope. Well, it could. That does an adapt effect.
Yeah, and I think that's his only option.
No, his option is going to be, well, Yu Ying doesn't often have 2 Mind Blasts in hand. But in this case, I guess it's 1 when I think about it.
It's just 1.
Yeah.
It's only 1.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be an even score. Ouch. Stop hitting yourself. I'll stop hitting him. Yu Ying ties it up at 1 apiece. Pretty ugly start on Yu Ying's side, but the mid game went exceptionally well as you know, Viper really wasn't able to get significant pressure going. And then from there, it was just, you know, a snowball effect. It was the giant endgame cards that really had massive impact.
I think the turning point there had to be the Deathstalker Rexar play. Viper gave up all tempo, all initiative in order to bank Deathstalker Rexar, that mana, to create zombies, but never had an opportunity to get an impactful Zombies. And imagine if he had gone wide on the board, sure, Dustbreaker punishes him, Psychic Scream punishes him, but then later on in the game, he can use Deathstalker Rexar to help with that tempo advantage and get those resources out. I can't tell right now if it's the right play. It's hard to like go through all the iterations of what could possibly happen, but I think that's the play that we have to look at when seeing that series, seeing Viper's good start and seeing it fall away so quickly.
Yeah, I think a big thing to look at there is just, you know, how things would have ended up going in that specific scenario and trying to take a look at it overhead. If Viper had gone for Life Drinker Crackling Razor Maw on that turn, he would have ended up sometimes with a minion that lives through Duskbreaker on the Life Drinker side. So, you know, I think that even in the face of Duskbreaker, you end up with a pretty decent turn. That probably would have come down for Yu Ying on the follow, which meant that Twilight Drake would not have come down.
Exactly.
Which meant that the Alexstrasza might not have hit on 9, which meant that, you know, Yu Ying might have found himself playing defense for a much larger portion of that game than what we ended up seeing. And I do think that the Deathstalker Rexar is... It's a bit optimistic. I don't want to say it's like conservative or safe. I actually think it's quite aggressive to just play a Deathstalker Rexar there, where you're so confident in your hand that you're going to get out of that situation. You know, if Viper had the Deadly Shot in his deck in his hand at that point, I could totally see playing that Deathstalker Rexar. It was the fact that he couldn't handle a big minion that really concerned me about it.
Yeah, no Hunter's Mark in the deck, but did have a deadly shot. But not much removal as we talked about with that list. But let's move into the next matchup, Game 3. Hunter for Yu Ying and this Malygos Rogue.
Yeah, it's
a Viper. This is a tough matchup.
It's an interesting deck, and if you haven't seen this deck piloted before, it wins in a very specific way every single time when it tries to win. It gets a Kobold Illusionist out, a 4-mana 3/3 that says Death Rattle. Put a copy of a minion from your hand into play as a 1/1. And so the goal there is to activate that Death Rattle multiple times. And you're going to use Necrium Blade, which is a 3-mana 3/2 weapon that says Death Rattle. Trigger one of your friendly minions' Death Rattles. And a card, Necrium Vial, 5-mana rogue spell. Trigger one of your friendly minions' Death Rattles twice. The goal is to get Malygos in your hand, play that Kobold Illusionist, have Malygos be the only minion in your hand, make multiple Malagis, and throw some burn spells at him. In the meantime, you play a lot of just cycle through your deck effects, even to the effect of Roll the Bones is in here.
Yeah, basically as much card draw as you can fit in. Fan of Knives, Roll the Bones, Shiv, Elven Minstrel, technically a draw card, Sprint. It's just all card draw all the time. And Elven Minstrel is really the card that makes it all work.
The bread and butter.
You only have 2 minions in the deck, 3 if you count the second Elven Minstrel, and that's Malygos and Kobold Illusionist. You need that to pull those out of your deck so your average draw is better. Then you need a Death Rattle activator, whether it's Necrium Blade or Necrium Vial.
Yeah.
So that's how it works, and it just needs to stay alive until that point. But it doesn't have the best ways to stay alive. It has no life gain. It has limited removal. That's pretty much all single target outside of the 2 vanishes, which come much later in the game.
All tempo oriented.
All tempo oriented, and that's where the deck tends to fall flat. When it's given a lot of time against those control decks, even against other combo decks, it oftentimes does its combo faster, but it has very little in the ways of defense.
I do like it though. You know, this is one of my, honestly, I'll call it my guilty pleasure deck of the format, where I know that queuing into ladder, it's usually a bad idea, as there's just so many aggressive decks that get played on ladder. But it's a blast to play. And in this matchup, you know, not quite as much so, but Yu Ying's start is pretty darn slow. With double Savannah Highmane, Sap buys Viper a lot of time to keep pushing through this. And so Yu Ying just even goes to the effect of just using Timberwolf to try to push some extra damage, and that's the best way to end up doing this, because with 2 evasions in deck, there's a chance that wide board states do not have an opportunity to really get much done. But Viper has finally fallen to a turn where there's no cycle and there's not really anything to do, and danger is now a very real thing.
But the bright side of all that is Viper is a single draw away from winning the game on the spot. With Prep Necrium Vial, if he draws Kobold Illusionist,
Elven Minstrel is good too.
And holds on to the Necrium Blade. He'd have to have the 3 Death Rattle activations in order to win the game. So 29.
If he pushed, so I just want to like do a hypothetical here. Let's say he'd push 3 damage to face to drop him to 26, and then you dagger up and drop him to 25.
That would be enough for just Necrium Vial, because each of those Sinister Strikes is 13 damage, so it'd be 26.
Yeah, so
you'd have 2 Malygos on it.
So in my opinion, I think that Viper actually could have swung with this Necrium Vial here.
Necrium Blade.
I'm sorry, the Necrium Blade to face, and then actually just gone with Dagger, kill the Timberwolf next turn, and try to buy some more life. But as it stands, it looks like he is playing solely for the Kobold Illusionist out, and now the not swinging with Necrium Vial to either hit face or hit a minion looks pretty disastrous, and he's dead.
He's not dead yet. He can sap a Spring Paw.
So you sap Spring Paw, kill Timberwolf. You drop to 7. You're staring at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other side of the board. So, that's the only play to live.
I don't think you even kill the Spring Paw.
You have to. You have to. I mean, the Timberwolf. You have to kill the Timberwolf.
It'd be 7 on board if you don't kill the Timberwolf.
Yes, you're correct.
So, and I honestly think he needs. This is smart. This is smart. Because he needs the extra 3 damage, or he needs the extra Death Rattle activation for his Kobold Illusionist out.
It's in the face of, okay. It was in the face of a Deathstalker Rexar being played, or in the face of a Taunt Minion hitting the battlefield. That was why Viper chose to play the Blade that way. But either way, he doesn't draw the key card and that's it. You know, the deck is, at its heart of hearts, a combo deck. It needs to draw Kobold Illusionist at some point, and that's why Elven Minstrel is such a vital card. It provides you with either Kobold Illusionist Malygos or the other Elven Minstrel, which will find those.
And you can assume that that match is going to go the way of a loss. Very tough matchup. The hardest matchup in the lineups outside of Odd Rogue, which he banned away. So now Viper has to try and target this Malygos Druid with his final 2 decks in order to take a win, which is definitely possible.
It definitely is, but you know, the work's cut out for him. I think with the Malygos Rogue, he gets slowed down by the armor gain from Yu-Ying quite a bit, although he's still able to reach, you know, heights of, you know, 80, 90 damage with Malygos Rogue.
Yeah.
And with the Hunter deck, I think with the double Dire Frenzy, double Life Drinker, double Tundra Rhino version, that it is a bit more of an advantage than the usual mid-range Hunter would have.
Yeah, I definitely agree there, but can Viper prey on this Malygos Druid to make a comeback in this series? Or will Yu-Ying just be Winter Championship? This is the first match of the day between Viper and Yu-Ying, the winner's match for Group A. The winner of this match will move on to the quarterfinals. Loser will move down to the decider match of the group, still trying to fight it out for a spot in the top 8. Right now, Yu-Ying has the Malygos Druid left to win this series, and he's got to take a win against either Malygos Rogue or the mid-range Hunter. Both can be pretty tough matchups. I think Malygos Druid, Malygos Rogue's not one we have too much data on. But Malygos Druid seems like a deck that's going to give a lot of time, but it also can gain a lot of armor.
Yes, and, you know, kind of with taking more time now with the change to Wild Growth and the change to Nourish, it does give a lot more time as a result of that, and really the way you speed that up is with exactly Twig of the World Tree.
Yeah.
Wild Growth and Nourish now at 3 and 6 mana are much more fair cards, I would say, in the grand scheme of things. But against Viper's deck, they do function very similarly to how they did in other matchups, where Viper's not really so concerned about dying as much as he is about delivering a killing blow. So for Viper, it is about finding Elven Minstrel to thin out the deck, but here
he doesn't need it.
But here's already got Kobold Illusionist and Malygos. So now for Viper, it's about finding Razor Petal Volley and ways to activate Death Rattles.
Yep.
And there you see some of the, I guess, wacky cards that end up making it into this deck. Roll the Bones is strictly there as a card draw effect, and instead of it being Novice Engineer, you want it to be Roll the Bones exactly. So that way you do not have extra minions in your deck. It's paramount that Kobold Illusionist has a clear hand with only Malygos at that stage. You're going to see Viper do things like dagger up and attack a lot, and eventually get that Necrim Vial online to activate Kobold Illusionist, and just keep going from there. Lots of damage buffed with, you know, a couple copies of Malygos, and you're looking at, I think the maximum I've done with this deck is like 82 or something like that. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, it is a pretty weird deck, but it also has the potential to go faster with this combo than almost any other deck. We've all seen the highlights of Zarek's Cloning Gallery Priest on turn 8, cloning out Cloning Gallery, getting the Malygos Velen double Radiant Elemental, and just killing you from whatever life total you may be at.
It's tough to do that with that particular deck.
With Malygos Rogue, you could do that way quicker. You could do it sometimes as early as like turn 6.
Yeah, the massive difference is that Viper is so much more susceptible to aggression than Cloning Gallery Priest is. Cloning Gallery Priest has great tools to fight off aggression, you know, between Spirit Lash, with, you know, a copy of Ziliax in there to help fight, the fact that you have Mass Hysteria and Psychic Scream. Viper has just Vanish. And if you've been watching those cartoons that we have sometimes in the break, and they vanish, and you hear that guy in the background go, "Yeah, they're still dead, though." Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, sometimes it does.
So Volley picked up, and Viper looking at that sprint next turn. How does he get the hand empty enough to be able to use Razor Petal Volley and sprint? And so that tells me that Razor Petal Volley's off the menu this turn. I did want to talk about the sap last turn, but honestly, the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. You want to backstab and kill a Dream Petal Florist. But he doesn't have that luxury anymore unless he wants a Razor Petal Volley.
Well, he can Razor Petal Volley and empty out the Razor Petals.
So you would backstab Razor Petal and use a dagger.
Yeah, to hold on to one of the Razor Petals.
You kind of want to sap, though.
Yeah.
There's not really any sap targets in this deck.
Could use Eviscerate, but it's kind of similar to the Razor Petal Volley in that sense.
We saw Viper use Eviscerates yesterday for defense, and it was costing him a lot in the games that he'd used Eviscerate, and that's often a tool that you pretty much want to burn your saps and you want to burn the rest of it before you use Eviscerates. That's almost an emergency tool when you have to use it for defense.
Yeah. But Dream Petal Force, very dangerous card to leave up on the board.
Whoa. Whoa. So this tells me that Viper's actually comfortable in this spot because of Razor Petal Volley, where he feels like that's going to be enough gas to get it done. I'm not sure I agree. Wow. That being said, I don't have a ton of reps on this deck. You know, I have a lot more than I'm willing to admit because it's, you know, kind of on ladder, it's an embarrassing deck to play where you just die to every single aggro deck. But the one thing I have remembered very much is that when I use Eviscerates and I use Sinister Strikes, I often don't find myself winning games.
Yeah. And you could tell Yuying's game plan right away. He played a Arcane Tyrant on turn 5 to try and get damage. Instead of going with Ferocious Alpha Cycle to his deck, he's just playing 2 minions, getting the guaranteed discount on the Malagos, and hero powering for that extra damage.
Well, that is a pretty big draw for Viper now. So Viper's game plan has become much more concise in the last turn, which is now that there's 2 Razor Petal Volleys, it's about getting those active and finding a way to activate Death Rattles. But I think he needs multiple Death Rattles or this isn't going to work. And now he's got to find a way to get Elven Minstrels out of hand in the meantime as well. Because if you have more minions in your hand, the Kobold Illusionist does not guaranteed summon the Malagos from hand. And that's probably the reason that Viper's held Backstab, is as another activation on Kobold Illusionist for an additional Malagos in this spot.
This is a rough hand. No preparations picked up either. He needs multiple turns to thin his hand out in order to get that combo even active, and beyond that, he needs the damage, so he needs time to play the Razor Petal Volleys as well. This is going to be tough, and he's got to be scared because Yuying has now played the Dream Petal Force twice, which he would really only do that if he had a key minion in his hand.
Well, I mean, I think you could have very easily done it just for pressure in this spot.
And he's gonna give up a card.
I think that's wise. I don't think there's a card in the deck other than Preparation that really makes a difference at this point. I think the Backstab's making a bigger difference by activating Kobold Illusionist for an additional Death Rattle.
I would agree, and the Backstab there would be useless because you'd Backstab for 2 damage and then no follow-up.
Yeah. You would be trading Backstab for a random card next turn in your deck. You already have the most important cards.
And I can assume that this is a plus attack.
Oh,
wait.
Oh, so I'm curious what the armor plays around in terms of sequencing. He has seen double Eviscerate and a Sinister Strike, so that would require Viper to actually use Razor Petal Volleys, and I'm not sure this actually changes the clock for Yuying, where he's got 6 from hand with the Malagos, he's got 7 sitting on board with 1. The 4 extra attack this turn would have set him to 17, and then, you know, I think that Yuying's anticipating Banish this turn, so he would have been using the Branching Pass strictly for that 4 damage. So is there a difference on Malagos math? It's 17 and 21.
I wonder.
And with a swipe pickup, that would be 15, 16 from the hero power? Not really.
Okay, fair enough. What about card draw then? He needs to pick up the burn damage to end the game. Maybe he found a breakpoint in Viper's damage?
I think that's likely what it is.
But it's so hard to account for it.
Well, again, 2 Eviscerates and a Sinister Strike have been used. So that leaves 1 Sinister Strike and then Razor Petal Volleys. The Razor Petal Volleys are hard to get going when you have 8 mana and 10 cards in hand.
But the thing is that's hard to pinpoint is how many geese can he summon?
Let's assume 2.
Well, if he assumes 2, which I guess is like the average at that point, you haven't seen a Necrium Blade. So maybe you can put him on Prep Necrium Vial and a Backstab. That's 3. It's so hard to calculate those breakpoints, especially when you're trying to figure out your own game plan.
So 1 Razor Petal Volley with 3 geese would be 32 damage.
Slow play, still not getting the Elven Minstrels out.
I don't think he had an option other than to Vanish this turn. Especially if your opponent's willing to Branching Pass for armor in that spot, you definitely need to look up and go, I think my opponent can do something that is going to pretty much put a big hurt in my plan. And so for Yuying, a lot of this comes down to how do you want to play out this turn? Would you rather have the additional minion in play with like a Spreading Plague? That card's basically dead in the matchup. Or would you rather...
You could. Spreading Plague or Arcane Tyrant naturalize your 1/5 Spreading
Draw
Plague.
cards. So burn a card here intentionally. That card doesn't really matter at this stage anymore. and finds more burn. So now the question is, draw the card or deal the extra damage. I don't think the extra damage matters. Swipe, Moonfire is 15, Hero Power is 16, and then
second
the
Moonfire
Arcane Tyrant.
Second Moonfire would be 21 as well.
So that's what Ewing was thinking about, was that that's an important Hero Power, because now if this 4-3 connects one more time to Viper's face, Ewing has lethal from hand.
Yep, lethal next turn. So Viper has to deal with this. Has to part ways with the sap if he wants to stay alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting pretty ugly for Viper's spot. It's like Necreum, it's like swing, Necreum Vial, sap. And honestly, you might load up the Necreum Vial and just swing, so that way, if you're in a desperate situation, you can at least risk the Kobold Illusionist from Malagos and just hope that the Malagos are the ones that come out of this.
Yeah, he needs to bank away some mana as well with playing the Razor Petal volleys in order to get some through. So we'd have exactly 4 mana remaining.
He's got to deal more than 32 damage as well.
So
42 in this instance.
1 Malagos with 4 Razor Petals will only be 24 damage.
Yeah, I'm looking at 2 Geese getting summoned eventually here. So Viper is going to go with the most mana efficient play. No minions left in deck to fetch,
which gives Yu Ying a lot of information.
So now Yu Ying needs to connect with 5 more damage to have lethal.
So
that's not damage.
Yeah, a Moonfire would have been enough, or a swipe. Malagos cost 0.
Yeah, and now I start really looking at, once again, towards the like spreading plagues to power out Tyrant.
Wait, no, he has the backstab as well for the first Malagos.
Oh, Yu Ying just going to go in. So Moonfire and Nourish, Yu Ying is drawing for the second Moonfire. And he found it! Yu Ying 3-1 over Viper with aggressive play. And I'll tell you what, I think Yu Ying's technical play has been pretty on point in this series.
I definitely agree.
Viper, I think the victim of some unfortunate draws with the Malagos Rogue, but it is a Feast or Famine combo deck. If you do not get the right draws, you are going to fall with that deck. Especially if Yu Ying has got, pretty much just good pressure like he had that game. It was the Wild Growth into the Arcane Tyrant. To start drawing cards, playing Dream Petal Florist, got the goods.
Yeah, well played, and he moves on 2-0 out of his group. And a fun stat that we picked up during the break, there's only been 2 players from China all time that have 2-0'd their groups in the current form HCT system, which is Jason Zhou in 2017 summer, who had 2 top 4 World Championship appearances, and Xiao Ti last year in summer, who's already going to the World Championship based on points leader. So a pretty big shoes to fill for Yu Ying when it comes to 2-0 in group.
See, to me, I feel like those shoes got filled here. I think Yu Ying's playing fantastic, and he joins an elite group of players from China who hold that similar style that he's had. And from what I've seen so far, Yu Ying has just brought solid decks, and he's played very solid. That's typically a winning combination that often a player that I look up to in terms of learning from, Zalay, preaches. Fundamentals, ABC Hearthstone. Play good Hearthstone and play it well with the good decks. You'll pick up some games.
One match down and many more to go here at day 2 of the Winter Championship of HCT. My name is Frodan. I'm joined by Brian Kibler. And coming up next, we got Bloody Face from the USA going up against Jing from China, looking to see if he can follow up Yu Ying's fantastic performance thus far, Kibler. One person through to the quarterfinal, and it's a Chinese player.
Yeah, and we saw it done by punishing the Malagos Rogue of Viper. And this matchup could end up potentially going a similar way, because Bloody Face does have a Quest Rogue in his lineup against Jing's particularly aggressive lineup.
Yeah, the aggressive lineup seems to be working out fairly well, because there's a lot of greed in the metagame, and particularly through these combo decks or these slow anti-control decks like Quest Rogue. taking a look at what they brought. Bloodyface brought Quest Rogue, Clone Priest, Midrange Hunter, and even Paladin with his Hunter being banned.
Zoo banned in 2019, right here. Here it is.
Yeah.
Bloodyface banning the single copy of Zoo we have the entire tournament, while Tempo Rogue, the Pirate Rogue deck, even Paladin, Midrange Hunter will be remaining. When would you expect Zoo to get banned and Hunter to stay up?
I really did not expect that, but the data does back up Bloodyface's analysis. The best deck against all of his lineup, especially when Hunter's banned, is Zoo Warlock. And, you know, Bloodyface still has even Paladin, which has relatively pretty good matchups. The question is, can Clone Priest and Quest Rogue handle the aggression, which I don't know if they can. And this is something that China does really well. You know, China, whenever they come to these international events, they a lot of times choose to play aggressive strategies. And, you know, I asked the Chinese player one time why that was, and they said it's because on ladder, people just play aggro decks all the time, given that, you know, ladder often becomes a efficiency of time.
Right.
So they end up playing a lot of aggro decks, and that's something that Omega Zero used to climb a lot, Shao Ti and all of them. So it's definitely not surprising that, once again, for this event, Chinese players brought an aggressive lineup.
It's true, and we will be into game number 1, which will be the even Paladin mirror match. And take a look at the specific differences between these lists. They are exceptionally similar. I'm trying to find, I'm like scrolling down the list now, and I'm literally failing to find, oh no, Bloodyface has 2 Avenging Wrath versus the 1 in Jing's deck.
Right.
And Jing has a Mojo Master where Bloodyface does not.
Right. Yeah, these lists are fairly uniform. Even Paladin has largely phased out equality and chosen instead to play a little bit more early game or a little bit more tech card oriented. And Jing's opening hand here, he's going to go first, which is pretty significant. It's the fact that he has a good turn 1, turn 2, and a good turn 4. If you compare a good turn 3 with his hero power, he is going to be firing on all cylinders. And I wonder, you know, how the equality nerf really does play a factor in this matchup to help you, or rather, doesn't allow you to have those comebacks nearly as easily.
Yeah, certainly equality was a card that you could use to play a little bit of a different paced game, playing even Paladin. You could very easily sort of sandbag your early turns, then Pyro Quality or Equality Consecration. Now these decks don't have Wild Pyromancer. Very often, even Paladin would be much more of a control mid-range style. Now it's much more of an aggro mid-range style, and that is due to the nerf to Equality, making it much less efficient in this style of deck.
That's right. Now, Bloodyface's saving grace is the use of the coin. You know, can he utilize that opportunity to put out a turn 4 a little bit quicker? Even decks tend to have power spikes on turns 4 and 8, and even Paladin is no exception to that. So if he's able to get that Blessing of Kings, for example, or pick up his own Corpse Taker, that might be able to be his swing turn.
Well, the big power spike really is Corpse Taker, and Jing currently has 2 of them, while Bloodyface has 0. So, you know, without a way to really force the Corpse Taker into Blessing of Kings is what's really powerful. If you're able to get a Corpse Taker that is uncontested and then buff it up, that can just end the game on the spot.
Well, this Hydrologist or Argent Protector both are pretty decent options to fill out the curve. The Hydrologist could pick up secrets that are very problematic for Bloodyface if he chooses to be aggressive with his coin. You have the opportunity to also stop a big Blessing of Kings push from your opponent with a Noble Sacrifice.
Yeah, Bloodyface does have the opportunity to coin Kings next turn, and that's got to be something that's on Jing's mind. He doesn't want to allow Bloodyface to just get an enormous Berserker that eats his Berserker. So the Hydrologist into either Auto Defense Matrix or Noble Sacrifice at least prevents that potential, which would, of course, if a secret does come down, mean that that's unlikely to be a route that Bloodyface takes with this turn.
Yeah. At the same time, I also kind of wonder, like, what are some other punishes? Consecration is not super bad because of the Yamani Berserker existing on board. Auto Defense Matrix is a choice here.
Yep, and that is what we see. And I would expect that to come down this turn to prevent the Berserker from getting a powerful trade.
Right. just not straight up on the Hydrologist, or in the worst case scenario, the Blessing of Kings, as you mentioned. And now Bloodyface will have to defuse the secret first. Logically, probably want to attack the Hydrologist to see what ends up happening. If it's Redemption, Noble Sacrifice, Auto Defense Matrix.
But the problem here for Bloodyface is that he doesn't, because of this Hydrologist into secret, he doesn't really have a way to leverage his Coin Blessing of Kings this turn. This is the potential to be one of those swing turns you were talking about, but the secret means that he just ends up running into too many failure cases with Coin Blessing of Kings here, and is going to go ahead and just attack Auto Defense Matrix. Is effectively the same thing as Noble Sacrifice here. It does leave him with that 5-1, but does not take down Jing's minion, so still stable board for the Chinese player.
Yeah, I wonder if Bloodyface wants to explore his own Hydrologist secret in this position, because any coin 4 is not that amazing in this spot here.
It will be Hydrologist as well. Noble Sacrifice and Redemption are the real options here. Sacrifice is kind of mediocre against the Amani Berserker. Yeah, you guys go ahead and choose the Redemption.
I mean, functionally, if Jing attacks correctly here, it's going to be about the same thing.
Right.
But the real question is, can Bloodyface handle the Corpse Taker?
Yeah, Jing does have Corpse Taker here, which he wants to get online as quickly as possible. One of the problems with Corpse Taker is it does weirdly get worse as the game goes on, as the chance of drawing your cards that power it up gets higher. So if he does draw, say, Wind Fury Harpy, which is his single copy of a Wind Fury minion in his deck, then the power of his Corpse Taker is reduced dramatically.
Yeah, well, he just wants to take 2 attacks off the board as well. And I think almost no matter how he does this, 1 minion will end up surviving. If he plays around Auto Defense Matrix, he should attack with...
he can attack Amani Berserker. Amani Berserker attacks into the Hydrologist, I think, is the best first attack against either Redemption or Auto Defense.
He can trade to the Amani Berserker there and then play the Corpse Taker.
Right. And that does mean that, okay, well, Bloodyface could have, say, Spellbreaker to get rid of at least the abilities on the Corpse Taker, but can only get a trade on the Amani Berserker, which doesn't really get you that far ahead. But it does at least get rid of Divine Shield, Lifesteal, Wind Fury.
It's true. The Wind Fury Divine Shield is the scariest part for sure. The Taunt Lifesteal is not nearly as impactful. It is minorly annoying, of course, because he would have been able to just go for an easy trade. The thing is, if he ends up having the Spellbreaker land and Jing doesn't trade, he has a Spike Ridge Steed the next turn.
Your magic shall not
So that's a possible way to help shut down the second Corpse Taker. However, Jing has that Blessing of Kings as well, so this is starting to get a little bit scary here for Bloodyface. Jing just has so much momentum, and it's leveraged by the fact that he went first, but also that he has these powerful Corpse Takers.
Yeah, I'd expect the Corpse Taker to just come down this turn. He does have the option of, say, Argent Protector to take a value trade, but it's he'd rather play this Corpse Taker while it's still so powerful.
Right, and that's the correct trade too, just to shut down that Coin Spikered Steed. Jing is looking very good right now. Bloodyface with the Amani Berserker pickup, not too amazing, but he does have a way to go wider onto the board, which is, I think, something that he's considering because of the Spikered Steed that's in his hand. So, for example, he could set up 3 minions on the board with Argent Protector's Divine Shield on one of them, and then if any of them survive, go for a Spikered Steed. But, again, the problem is he's still not dealing with the Corpse Taker.
Right, and he can't deal with the Corpse Taker, so what is just his next best option? And I think I agree with you that sort of make a wide board, force your opponent to at least use those Corpse Taker attacks, trading, eating your minions, in order to prevent them from going face for tons of damage.
I must move quickly.
There is, of course, the fact that, well, if they have Consecration, you play these 3 minions, you're just running right into that.
Yeah. Well, this does play a little bit more to that consecration fear.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Amani Berserker initially.
I think the thought process here is that Bloodyface wants the 3 attack minion on the board at least, but it is a extremely vulnerable board to this consecration, and Jing has exactly that.
Yeah, consecration here is pretty nasty. I like that Jing hesitates first, though, because, I mean, you know, you have a Corpse Taker and you have a Blessing of Kings. That's still 14, 15 damage here with the extra 1/1 attack. Something worth considering, at least.
Yeah. I do think the fact that his opponent can hero power coin Spike Ridge Steed potentially next turn means that you know that you can't get rid of the threat of Spike Ridge Steed entirely, but you can at least make it very inefficient for them.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of appeal to clearing off the board to prevent any kind of stabilization with that Spike Ridge Steed. And right now, you know, if you do say you Consecration, or rather you Blessing of Kings, yes, your opponent could have. Did use a Spellbreaker, might have used it on a previous turn, but your entire turn is neutralized by a Spellbreaker effect, whereas if you Consecration, you at least have cleared off their board proactively.
This is not looking good here for Bloodyface.
Reporting for duty.
Trying to think of another card to help him bail him out in this spot. He does have a second Spellbreaker, which would be really nice.
I mean, there is the possibility of, I was going to say Avenging Wrath and having it hit perfectly, which frankly may be the position that Bloodyface is in now. He'd need 4 to hit the Corpse Taker, though, and that's very unlikely.
Yeah, if he ends up going for a Hero Power Spiker Steed, the Blessing King just blows him out.
Right.
And then almost every other alternative is not great. Like, any kind of 2-drop plus Blessing of Kings himself is not that great. So it might be that Avenging Wrath pull. Wonder what the math is behind this to calculate.
I mean, one of the big things too is that Bloodyface has not seen a Spellbreaker from Jing. So it's not just Blessing of Kings. Blessing of Kings or Spellbreaker makes this Spike Ridge Steed pretty terrible. And obviously the chance of success of Avenging Wrath here is low. Yeah, he's gonna go for the Spike Ridge Steed though. And this is kind of the safe play to try and stay alive.
It just lines up so perfectly with his Blessing right back. In fact, he can do it twice over.
He could actually even Blessing of Kings and Argent Protector here, which preserves even more of the health on this minion. I'm not sure that's necessary.
You probably Argent Protector afterwards to stop any.
Yeah. Well, there's no equality though.
Oh yeah, you're right. He's not playing a list with equality.
Right. So it actually the only well, you could prevent say like a True Silver, but there's no True Silver plus damage. Kind of a True Silver into your 7-attack minion. They're in bad shape anyway.
Yeah, it's just it's slightly better against like Avenging Wrath, for example, because you have 2 health instead of the 1 that needs to get hit. I don't know if it's that impactful in this position.
I must move quickly.
Yeah, not really much to really consider here for Jing. Just put up as much pressure as possible, and now Bloodyface really wishing that this Avenging Wrath hits perfectly.
Yeah, this is a major. Okay, can't even hit it anymore. Just not enough.
That's just game.
Yep, and Bloodyface will concede, meaning Jing takes the mirror match. And that's always a pretty big one, because whenever 2 lineups have the same deck, you know, obviously getting over the hump with one of them in the mirror match is a pretty big edge.
Yeah, although I will say that this Even Paladin from Jing was likely to take a win anyways against the Clone Priest or the Quest Rogue.
Also true.
The deck for us, at least from my perspective, to focus on is, can he beat the Tempo Rogue? Because those matchups are a lot closer, at least on paper, than it is for the other aggressive decks. You know, Mid-Range Hunter will get a win most likely against one of these decks from Bloodyface.
High pressure situations. That's the sort of thing that leads people to believe you're a sociopath.
Yeah, or you just, you know, queue up Hearthstone every day and smile for the camera with your Pomeranian dog.
Everyone needs their cover, man, okay?
Going into game number 2, we have Priest versus Hunter. This is the Clone Priest from Bloodyface. Bloodyface, He said that he really wanted to bring the Topsy-Turvy Priest. He said he wanted to bring a card druid, but said this is just not the meta for it. And he's kind of right. If he did bring that, I would say that he has like a very low, like 10% chance maybe to get out of the series. But now, because he brought decks that have a little bit better of an anti-aggro plan for things like Spirit Lash comebacks, I think that he does have a shot. This is still a tough matchup, though, about 60-40 in favor of the Hunter. But, I mean, that's I'll take those odds if I'm Bloody Face and I'm going up against an aggro lineup.
Yeah, this is Clone Priest has been a very popular deck on the ladder for a while now. Originally, kind of emerged as kind of a meme deck. It was like, oh, I'm playing this ridiculous like big minion control deck, combo deck, and then people sort of realized, oh wait, this actually is a pretty powerful deck.
Yeah.
And part of that is because despite being this long game control combo deck, it gets to play Mass Hysteria, it gets to play Spirit Lash, it gets to play Psychic Scream. It has a ton of tools to keep itself alive as long as the opponent doesn't go too fast. And Jing, though, did pick up that Dire Mole in turn 1 for the dreaded Mole into Crackling Razor Maw opening.
Yeah.
That is extremely powerful and extremely fast.
Yeah, if it gets that +3 attack, that will be pretty devastating for Bloody Face to start things off here. Not game ending. Very, oof.
All right.
Yeah, those
Ow.
claws are on fire. It is a lot of damage coming in, especially when you have things like Timberwolf and whatnot to really add to that damage. Bloody Face might be in that position where, you know, if the attack keeps getting bigger, he might Shadow Word Death Dire Mole.
If that Timberwolf comes out, boom, death.
I mean, it's still a turn away from 2 turns away from Mass Hysteria, so he might have to do something like that.
We did have that little bit about bad catchphrases. You just have a bad catchphrase for the Dire Mole into Crackling Razor Maw. Holy moly! I'm surprised Admirable has not done that one yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing about Admirable and his catchphrase is that if someone else is going to do it, he doesn't want to like encroach on someone's territory. He's very respectful. He has to come up with something original himself. But you know, for Jing, he's got ways to really add to that damage right now. He's got that Timberwolf, Spring Paw. He can pretty much just also take this very slow. He can coin out the Flanking Strike as well to add a little bit more pressure onto the board. It's not like his hand is curving out to anything dramatic either, so utilizing the coin now could be something beneficial to him later on.
One thing that Jing really does need to keep in mind, though, is that killing this Gargoyle does give Bloody Face a coin, which means that Mass Hysteria is a potential option next turn. So he wants to try to leave a board that is as strong against Mass Hysteria as he can.
Right. Well, there are 3 minions, and Mass Hysteria means that it'll leave at least a 3 attack minion or better. You know, like in the best case scenario, the Wolf attacks the Razor Maw. And then in the worst case scenario, he's stuck with the Razor Maw. It's not the end of the world, I think. He still gets some damage to keep pushing through. So if Bloody Face chooses to use that Mass Hysteria, he's removing basically 6 attack, more or less.
I mean, I think Bloody Face needs to. I mean, right here, he's threatening. He's being threatened by 10 damage on board, and you know, if a Timberwolf comes down, that's 13 damage. And that's just
18.
That's just so much damage.
Right. Yeah, we're not mathematicians or anything, but that's a lot of damage. And in this position, Bloody Face can't really afford to take too much more because then he's going to have to play, you know, Spirit Lash and Radiant Elemental and pray for defensive hopes. You know, at that point, Hunter is just closing in, and they're just going to change their game plan to just be all out aggressive.
Yeah, the problem is that, you know, coin into Mass Hysteria means that, okay, well, I kill 2 of these, and I am significantly slowing the aggression. But what happens next? What's my next plan? He's actually going to Eternal Servitude for the Gargoyle. Wow. Okay, so he is taking things very slow.
Oh, man. So if you're Jing,
you're 1 damage off lethal.
Yeah, you're so close. Do you go for it?
So let's say you Timberwolf into kill command, put your opponent to 1 life. Then let's say your opponent has Spirit Lash. They can Spirit Lash, and because they have to Spirit Lash, they can't just cast Mass Hysteria because they're dead.
Right,
but
even
hero
then,
power.
the Spirit Lash.
Spirit Lash does not save you. I don't think you can attack into. Well, you cast it first. You gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 life. You put yourself to 6. You attack into one of the 3 health minions, the Dire Mole. So you still have 6 more damage in the board. So you're still dead.
I want to go face. I want to pressure my opponent as best as I can.
You actually don't even need to necessarily play the kill command here because you can just play it off next turn and weave in the hero power too. So there's no reason to put them to 1. You actually just squeeze out damage over turn more effectively with the hero power here. Also, your opponent doesn't necessarily know, okay, well, there's kill command. I'm dead if I don't gain more life. All right, well, there's another Mass Hysteria.
So, if you Radiant Elemental Spirit Lash, you can double coin and place Mass Hysteria, I believe, and that allows you to actually, I think it's a guaranteed clear at that point. Because there's 4 minions and they all have enough attack to kill each other.
I believe that's correct.
So I think that should be Bloody Face's.
Yeah, that's actually his best case scenario for sure, and it's I think the only way he doesn't die against specifically kill command.
He's at 9, but he does have Shadow Essence coming up, and
right.
Let's see what he can pull off of that. He could get like the Lich King, for example, or Ziliax.
Wait, does he have enough mana for that? He will have, it's 3 for this, so it's 2. Yeah, no, he does. Right. So Radiant, Radiant plus Spirit Lash.
Quickly.
Oh, is he just going straight for like a Ziliax in this position?
Unity.
Oh my gosh! How did he do that? What?
Wow. All right.
But is he just dead anyways? Just kill command.
He still just dies. Kill command still kills him here. Yeah, just kill command the Ziliax, go to face.
I get what he's trying to do, because he says if he doesn't have kill command, then he would have to punch through this and he'd gain a bunch of life and he could save Spirit Lash for like the big swing through
but if he doesn't if he doesn't hit exactly Ziliax, he's 100% dead.
Right, Ziliax, he had Lyra, Lich King, Malygos, Prophet Valen, and Thanos as an Oh no, he doesn't have Thanos on his list. So you had four minions you could have gotten besides Ziliax, which was very risky in itself.
Right. So, I mean, we were trying to create a scenario. It's like, okay, what can I do to beat kill command? And clearly, Bloody Face's thought was, well, I can't beat kill command.
Right.
And I can't use all of my resources here to try to put myself in a situation to just not die next turn. But you know, he got the best possible scenario and still died to Jing's aggression there.
All right, well, that's a 2-0 lead for Jing, and I think Bloody Face is getting pushed already this quickly. His back is to the wall. We're going to find out what happens when we come back to the HCT Winter Guard. And I think if there's anything that we've talked about in the pre-show, as well as throughout the ARC theme of the weekend, is can China finally put their stamp on the global stage? And Jing is 1 game away from doing exactly that.
Jing's kind of caught between the 2 storylines we have here, which is China's resurgence as well as the power of these aggressive decks. And he is in the situation where, well, he's got these really powerful aggressive decks, which have been putting Bloody Face in difficult situations that he's not been able to get out of so far.
That's right. Or just a reminder that Jing's Grim Rally Token Zoo Warlock, which I mean, Zoo does have a lot of minions anyways, but it's especially board flood heavy than compared to other decks. That got banned. And instead, he's playing this Pirate Tempo Rogue up against the Quest Rogue. Now, the data is there's not a lot of data out there, and it implies that this matchup is pretty even, which I don't think is the case. I would
be very surprised if that were true.
I think it's just largely a very weak sample size, given how new this deck is and how rare it is for people to want to play Quest Rogue, let alone play it on ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the people who are brave enough to venture with Quest Rogue onto ladder are, 1, teching heavily against aggro because they understand that Odd Paladin is still a thing. Even Shaman is still like on ladder represented decently. So when you play Quest Rogue on ladder, you tend to want to have those anti-aggro tools. And then 2, people who are mad enough to play Quest Rogue on ladder are pretty good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jing, he's going to go ahead and keep the Myra's Unstable Element in his opening hand. Does find Edwin Van Cleef as well. So the possibility for a fast Edwin here, which is less crushing in this matchup than it is in some others, simply because of the presence of Glacial Shard and Wax Elemental and the like, but can still put a lot of pressure on very quickly.
Yeah, agreed. Do want to point out that both of these players did end up getting the sweeps too early on, right? So it was like a pretty fast, convincing victories from the previous day.
I think Jing won 3-1.
Oh, actually, you're correct. He was the first person to
his match was the first one that actually had a player take a win
winning
and
it,
not
yeah.
win the series.
It was 3-1 though, so it was still like not as close as as we saw some of the second half matches. With a hand like this, can also do something similar because you mentioned that Van Cleef. I'm kind of wondering with each cheap spell picked up, how big can that bad boy get?
Well, if he finds, say, Eviscerate here, there's Deadly Poison. All right, well, maybe Bloody Fist will place in the next turn.
Right.
Can Hero Power now. Next turn he could play, say, Coin, Deadly Poison, Backstab, Van Cleef.
Right.
Would be a potent turn for sure.
That'd be really good. And plus, he has a great combination of having Edwin Van Cleef do damage early on and refill all the resources he used to pump Van Cleef with Myers and Stable Element. It's a holy matrimony.
Choose soon.
Jing taking his time, wondering. I mean, he does have the opportunity to coin out the Van Cleef right now.
So many.
Yeah, you can make a 4/4 now, which has at least some appeal for sure. Just get a relatively quick clock on. Looks like he's going to be a little bit greedier though.
I do like it because if he waits a turn, he can get that 4/4, extra 4/4, and make Van Cleef an 8/8, which essentially makes the damage you would have gotten anyways.
Right. There's that wax element we talked about though.
Oh man. Now that you have a Deadly Poison and a Captain Greenskin, that is a lot of damage. That would be 12 damage off that weapon because it'd be a 4/3. And, well, I mean, that already gets you more than a third of the way through to kill your opponent. And that being said, it doesn't line up very cleanly with the Van Cleef play.
Yeah, because Bloody Face has not yet played a minion, you don't have an opportunity to backstab, so you really can still only make Van Cleef as a 6/6 if you want to use your coin with Deadly Poison. But Jing doesn't really want to give Bloody Face time, is the thing. And
Exactly.
I think that now he's going to pull the trigger, even though, yes, Van Cleef can get bigger, and he's definitely going to commit it here. Here we go, 6/6 Van Cleef. Definitely a part of a fast clock, but as we see in Bloody Face's hand, there's a Glacial Shard, there's a Wax Element. There's a lot of ways to mitigate the damage from this Van Cleef. I mean, this turn could even be Glacial Shard, bounce it, and play Wax Elemental if Bloody Face wants.
Yeah, I think when your opponent improves any kind of weapon that they have, whether upgrade or Captain Greenskin, or in this case, Deadly Poison, you have the ability to drop these taunt minions to absorb that big damage. Before, if it's just a one-attack dagger, it feels like a waste of the Wax Elemental. Now, Jing would have to invest more damage into it.
Right.
So I do like that play. Glacial Shard is also a very likely candidate for a bouncing quest completion because you need to stop those aggressive plays. And it makes a lot more sense when your opponent puts that big Van Cleef.
Well, Glacial Shard is particularly powerful against this build of Rogue because it doesn't go super wide in the board. It does have Fireflies and deckhands and such, but it's not like Odd Rogue, which has tons of one-drops. It generally invests in a big weapon or a big to mid-sized minion like a Hench Clan Thug, and yeah, it's a great opportunity for Bloody Face to get some value here. There's also the Elven Minstrels in hand, so there's a lot of reload for Bloody Face after the fact, and frankly, the Wax Elemental can protect this the Glacial Shard next turn too, if he does Glacial Shard your Van Cleef again and play Minstrel. So Jing would have to be able to get through to kill the Glacial Shard to prevent an additional bounce effect from the Minstrel, or even just another Glacial Shard being drawn to stop the quest progression.
Yeah, well said. I think Glacial Shard is still probably even in that scenario against Odd Rogue one of the better cards to bounce to finish the quest. Yeah, even despite going wide, I think that's how crucial it is, and why having that double Elven Minstrel to get that second Glacial Shard is going to be so crucial.
More to my point is that I think it's even better here,
right?
Because your opponent is investing in, say, buffing a weapon with Deadly Poison, so freezing their face is a big deal. And obviously here, there's Jing did not have a quick start because his deck does not have nearly as many one-drops as Odd Rogue, and thus the power of Glacial Shard to mitigate mid-game damage is huge.
Right. I wonder if Jing can set up the Shadow Blade. But the thing is, it's not too much different than just playing, keeping this dagger and then going Captain Greenskin, but you do get rid of the Divine Shield, which is kind of annoying.
think the backstab here is in part a nod to the threat of perhaps prep vanish, giving the additional bounce effect to Bloody Face. Ooh, and that, speaking of bounce effects, that Shadow Step draw is fantastic because it allows him to set up Glacial Shard into the Minstrel, and even if he doesn't find a second Glacial Shard, there's Shadow Step to protect it.
Right, and now with that second Elven Minstrel to help weed through more decks, he can wait until he gets yet another bouncer.
Another preparation. Not what Jing is looking for. And we see just mid-sized minion, the absolute prey of these Glacial Shards.
Yeah, maybe that's why this matchup is closer to even, because if you're able to find that Glacial Shard and continue to keep bouncing it, and you vanish these mid-sized minions which take a lot of mana to play, then they don't really get their offense started whatsoever.
Yeah, my gut was definitely that it felt like it ought to be pretty favored for the Tempo Rogue, but we're seeing here how the Glacial Shards and the Wax Elementals are just mitigating so much damage. And granted, I do think Jing's opening here has been fairly weak. He didn't have a Hench Clan Thug. He didn't have a Firefly. He hasn't really been able to get chip damage in, which does make the burst damage potential of this deck, which is higher than Odd Rogue, thanks to having Eviscerates plus the bigger weapons, Deadly Poison, and such. And more access to those weapons thanks to Raiding Party as well.
Yeah, and also, to be fair, there's 30 of this sample size. So it's not exactly like we have, like, it's not exact science.
So you're saying the numbers are perfect.
Well, I mean, 38 games is kind of like a play session, if you will. If you're practicing for a tournament, you're like, okay, we got like 20, 25, 30 games in, so we generally have a good idea of how this matchup goes.
I wonder.
It is data taken from high legend play, though, or higher level play. Jing picks up the Dread Corsair, so if he chooses to go more aggressive through like the unstable element this turn, he can squeeze that all in. And honestly, I don't know how much longer he wants this game to go, so I wouldn't be opposed to that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely an argument for Jing to just, send as much as he can to the face right now, like unload his hand, and just try and go for it. Because he knows there's another freeze effect in Bloody Face's hand.
Right.
If he gets him to 12, I actually can't get him to 12 here. He's going to fight for the board a little bit. All right.
I like this equip with the weapon because I think this kind of indicates he's leaning towards that unstable element, needs to get more out of his hand, and he wants to burst because he might have a chance to lethal next turn. Let's say he prep Myers Unstable Element, and then with the 5 mana remaining picks up like a Sousy Deckhand and 2 Eviscerates. That's 2, 4, 8, 10, 13, and then Van Cleef plus Dread Corsair.
Van Cleef is almost certainly getting frozen here, right?
Sure.
Jing knows that this is not gonna get a.
That would still be 16 then, assuming the Dread Corsair gets to hit phase.
Yeah. So Bloody Face, I mean, he's picked up a couple of awkward cards here, frankly. From he hasn't found another bounce effect, so he has no way to ensure that if he replays this Glacial Shard, that it's going to be able to help keep advancing his quest. He has not found Sonya to be able to use, the Boar to advance quest. He hasn't found Vanish. So there's a lot of key elements that Bloody Face is in fact missing, despite having an excellent early game.
Right, and he needs to hold on to like at least 1 Vicious Scale high, so that way if he gets the quest completed, he has a way to bounce back his life total. Goes for it anyways. I like it though. You have to kind of be aggressive to win some of these worst matchups.
I think this is recognition that he has to get something going here. He can't try and play.
It's a good draw.
He can't try and play a slow game where he needs to ensure that he has the bounce effect. He's got to say, okay, well, I need to slow your damage down because I could just die, and I need to get this health gain from the Scale Hide in play for exactly the same reason. I'm clearly under a lot of pressure, and I don't have the tools to turn the corner yet, so I need to take a risk.
Jing has a couple of really interesting plays, kind of speaking about risk. Like, does he want to Vile Spine and then clear a minion? Does he want to SI7 Agent? Like, he can play one of the combo cards, and then Myers Unstable. I think and he's making that exact debate right now. It's like, Vile Spine Slayer helps me get 2 attacks out at once. And then I can also just dagger down this 2-1. But then I can also Myers and Stable Element first, see if I pick up Backstab, and then Backstab the 2-1.
Right. It's also just, do I want to Myers now?
That's also a fair.
Does he want to wait a turn, perhaps? I don't think so. I think he wants to fire it up now because, you know, much like Bloodyface has recognized, okay, the window's closing, Jing. Ooh, there's another Eviscerate, a Backstab.
Ooh, that's a big pickup. The Backstab is huge. That doesn't go 3 to the... Oh, okay, I can actually kill the Vicious Scale High. Makes most sense for Sonya. Double Hedge can't thug Raiding Party. Raiding Party not that great.
Raiding Party's a dead card here. Shadowblade is okay, but it doesn't give him more burst damage next turn at least.
Sure.
The 2 Thugs are similarly okay. Oh, and there it is!
That is brutal. Bloodyface 1 card away from being able to survive. But that Quest Rogue falls, and it goes to show you once again, don't sleep on the aggressive decks. Everybody is talking about 1-turn kill and combo and anti-control, but aggro still finds a way.
Yeah, we got a little caught up in looking at how good of a unstable element was.